Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to provide you with a further update on the rapidly escalating war in Iran because after another night of military attacks, further US casualties, new strikes on shipping and another sharp jump in the oil price, it now appears that the temporary ceasefire is completely gone. The United States have now carried out a ninth consecutive night of strikes against Iran. Iran has launched further attacks on US military assets across the Middle East. More American military personnel have unfortunately been killed. Commercial ships are once again being hit around the Strait of Hormuz, and Brent crude oil has climbed back above $90 per barrel. So rather than moving towards peace, this conflict is moving steadily back towards a full-scale war. And that is seriously bad news, not just for Iran, the United States, and the Middle East, but for the entire global economy. Now, before we get into the details today, could I ask you to give me a thumbs up for this video? And if possible, if you've got that hype button available to you, please hit that because that will really help this video to get promoted to more people. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that red subscribe button because it really helps me with the algorithm. Make sure that this video is shared with more people and also puts a smile on my face. Now, the latest escalation began with another wave of American strikes against Iran. According to US Central Command, the latest operation targeted Iranian military command centers, air defense systems, coastal surveillance facilities, maritime capabilities, missile and drone launch sites, and communication networks. So this was not a small or symbolic response. The US is systematically targeting the infrastructure that Iran uses to identify, track, and attack ships moving through the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian media reported explosions in a number of locations, including Tabriz in northwestern Iran, as well as Chabahar, Konarak, and Bandar Imam Khomeini. Tabriz is particularly significant because the area is believed to contain an underground missile facility operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Iranian authorities say that at least one person was killed in the latest American strikes around Tabriz. But the important point here is that these attacks are now spreading across a wide geographical area. The US is not limiting its operations to one particular military installation or one part of the Iranian coastline. It is targeting command structures, missile systems, surveillance facilities, ports, and maritime assets all across Iran. And Iran is responding. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps say that it launched ballistic missiles at American aircraft located at an airport in Jordan. It also claims to have attacked American military assets at Al-Adiri camp and Ali al-Salem air base in Kuwait, as well as American-linked targets in Syria. Warning sirens sounded in Bahrain, which is home to the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet, and Kuwait said that its air defense systems were attempting to intercept incoming Iranian drones. A desalination plant in Kuwait was also attacked for the second consecutive day, causing a fire. Kuwait described this as a direct attack on vital civilian infrastructure. And this is another worrying development because desalination plants are not simply industrial facilities. In parts of the world, they are essential to everyday life. They produce drinking water needed by millions of people. Once both sides start attacking infrastructure used by civilian populations, the risk of wider regional disruption increases dramatically. The other major development relates to shipping. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says that 2 oil tankers exploded and were immobilized while attempting to pass through what Iran describes as an unsafe southern route of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran claims that the ships had been encouraged by the United States to use this route in order to avoid Iranian-controlled shipping lanes. At this stage, we don't know exactly what happened, but Iran is indicating that mines were involved in taking out these ships. Iran has not provided the names of the 2 tankers and not confirmed which countries they are registered in, but all provided information about their crews and whether there are any casualties. However, separately from the Iranian claims, the UK Maritime Trade Operations Centre reported that a vessel caught fire near the coast of Oman after being hit by a projectile. The crew reportedly abandoned the vessel, which was left drifting and burning. So even though all the details remain unclear at this stage, what is very clear is that commercial shipping around the Strait of Hormuz is once again under direct physical threat. And this brings us back to the fundamental disagreement at the heart of this conflict. Iran believes that it should be able to control the passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz. It wants vessels to comply with Iranian instructions and, in effect, obtain approval before passing through. Iran says that ships failing to follow these rules can be treated as hostile or illegitimate traffic. The US completely rejects that position. The American view is that the Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway and that commercial vessels have a right to freedom of navigation. The United States has therefore been encouraging ships to use alternative routes through the strait and has been attacking Iranian surveillance, missile and coastal facilities that are threatening those vessels. But at the same time, the US has reintroduced its own naval blockade against Iranian ports. The American military say that it has redirected 6 ships and disabled another vessel as part of its efforts to prevent Iran from exporting oil to hurt the Iranian economy. So what we now have is effectively a dual blockade. Iran is threatening or attacking ships that do not comply with its rules, and the United States is intercepting ships attempting to enter or leave Iranian ports. Both sides are interfering with commercial traffic. Both sides believe that their actions are justified, and neither side appears willing to back down. Iran has issued an extremely direct warning that the Strait of Hormuz will remain unsafe as long as American military operations continue. The Revolutionary Guard has said that the passage will not be safe for petrochemical products or even a single drop of oil or gas. Now that is a major threat. Before this war began, around 20% of all internationally traded oil passed through the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. Huge volumes of liquefied natural gas also move through this narrow waterway. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar and Iran all depend to varying degrees on the strait to export their energy products. There are some pipelines that allow a proportion of these exports to bypass Hormuz, but there is nowhere near enough alternative capacity to replace the full volume normally transported by sea. And the latest shipping figures show just how serious the disruption has become. Only 4 vessels passed through the strait on Sunday. That was down from 8 on Saturday. Even 8 ships is an extremely low number for one of the most important commercial waterways in the world. 4 ships tells us that normal traffic has effectively collapsed, because normally we'd expect 130 of these huge tankers to be going through every day. Ship owners don't want to send their vessels into an active war zone, and crews don't want to run the risk of being attacked. Insurance companies have either increased their premiums dramatically or refused to provide any cover. And even where a ship is technically able to pass through, the financial and physical risks may simply be too high now. That reduced traffic is now feeding directly into the oil market. Brent crude has now moved above $90 per barrel. It rose by around 3% in the latest trading session after gaining around 16% last week. And to put this into context, oil was trading at around $60 per barrel at the beginning of this year. So Brent crude is now around 50% more expensive than it was at the start of the year. That represents an enormous increase in the cost of the world's most important energy commodity. And it doesn't stop with the price quoted on financial markets. Oil shipped through a war zone becomes more expensive to insure, tankers have to wait for military escorts, ships are forced to take longer routes, freight rates increase, security costs rise, and those additional costs are eventually passed through to refineries, businesses, and consumers. Strategic oil reserves have helped to cushion the impact so far. Governments have released oil into the market in an attempt to replace some of the missing supply and prevent prices from going sky high. But strategic reserves are not a permanent source of production. They are simply emergency stockpiles. Every barrel released today is a barrel that will need to be replaced in the future. And the longer this war continues, the more difficult it becomes to keep those reserves balancing the market. There's also another important problem. Oil inventories are reported to be at their tightest level in 5 years. That means the global market has a much smaller safety buffer than it had at the beginning of this conflict 5 months ago. When the war first started, markets could take some comfort from existing inventories, emergency reserves, and the possibility that the fighting would be short-lived. It might be over in a few days. Almost 5 months later, those assumptions are no longer valid. Inventories have been drawn down, the temporary agreement has collapsed, shipping is being attacked again, there is no political solution to the issues that are being debated, And this war, let's not forget, began on the 28th of February. At the time, there was widespread speculation that the fighting would only be around for maybe a couple of days. We're now 5 months in. 17 American personnel have been killed and more than 420 have been wounded. The US have confirmed that another American service member was confirmed dead following an incident in northern Iraq involving the controlled detonation of an unexploded Iranian attack drone. 2 American personnel had already been confirmed killed in the Iranian strike in Jordan, while another individual was initially listed as missing. The latest military deaths make it politically harder for the US to reduce its operations. Every new casualty creates further pressure for retaliation, but every American retaliation gives Iran another justification for launching missiles and drones at American bases, American allies, and commercial shipping. This is the escalation cycle: attack, retaliation, counter-retaliation, and then further escalation. And once that cycle becomes established, it becomes extremely difficult for either side to step away without appearing weak. The economic consequences are now spreading well beyond the region, however. Higher oil prices increase the cost of gasoline and petrol and diesel for all of us. They make aviation fuel more expensive. They raise the cost of transporting food and manufactured goods. They increase the cost of plastics, chemicals, fertilizers, and thousands of industrial products that are derived from oil and natural gas. Eventually, those costs feed into consumer prices, and that creates another inflation shock at exactly the wrong time. Central banks around the world have spent years trying to bring inflation back under control. Interest rates remain relatively high in many countries, and governments are carrying enormous amounts of debt. Businesses have also borrowed heavily. Households are already struggling with higher mortgage payments, rent, and living costs. And if oil remains at $90 per barrel or even moves back above $100, inflation could prove more persistent than central banks expected. And that would make it more difficult to cut interest rates. And in some countries, central banks may even be forced to consider further increases. Higher for longer interest rates mean more expensive government borrowing. They mean more expensive mortgages and higher financing costs for businesses, and less money available for investment and consumer spending. Companies facing uncertain energy prices are less likely to build new factories, purchase new equipment, or expand their operations. Consumers facing higher food, fuel, and mortgage costs are less likely to spend money on restaurants, holidays, cars, and other discretionary items. So the war damages both supply and demand. It increases business costs while simultaneously reducing consumer confidence. And all of this is happening at a time when there are already signs that the global economy is slowing. Growth in China has weakened, a number of European countries remain fragile, governments are struggling with large budget deficits, and businesses around the world are already dealing with trade disruption, tariffs, and geopolitical uncertainty. The Iran war adds another major shock on top of those existing problems. There really is no positive economic angle here. There's no cheap alternative source of energy waiting to replace all the oil and gas that normally passes through the Strait of Hormuz. There's no guarantee when the fighting will end, and there is no indication that either Iran or the USA is prepared to accept the other side's position. The US says Iran won't be allowed to control the international waterway. Iran says that the strait will remain unsafe while American forces continue their attacks and interfere with Iranian shipping. Those positions are fundamentally incompatible. Diplomacy is still being mentioned. The US says it remains open to negotiations, but it's also said that any negotiations must be genuine and that military strikes will continue while Iran attacks commercial shipping. Iran, meanwhile, appears determined to demonstrate that it remains the ability to disrupt the global energy market. So although the diplomatic door may technically remain open, neither side appears to be walking towards it. And that leaves the global economy facing an extremely dangerous period. Oil is already above $90, shipping traffic through Hormuz has largely stalled, emergency reserves are being depleted, inventories are tight, military casualties are increasing, civilian infrastructure is being attacked, and the ceasefire that was supposed to provide a route towards peace has collapsed. This is no longer a short-lived military operation. It's becoming a prolonged war of attrition centered around one of the most economically important waterways on the planet. And unless something changes soon, the consequences will continue to spread through energy prices, inflation, interest rates, government finances, business investment, and household living costs around the world. So hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, or maybe didn't like it, but you thought it was interesting, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel and give me a hype if you can, if that's available to you, because that will really help me with the algorithm. Just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone that's supporting me. If you've bought me a coffee, or sent me YouTube super thanks, or signed up as a patron or a member, thank you for that support. It really genuinely helps to keep me going. I definitely wouldn't have been making videos as long as I have been without your support. So thank you, really do appreciate it.